Here we are again. Welcome back. So this video will be part 3, and this will be Grandad's Suffolk 12-inch Colt motor mower full restoration. So for those that haven't seen part 2 and part 1, this is all about my Grandad's 12-inch Suffolk Colt, which I've had for a long time and not looked after it very well. It's been stored outside undercover for a long time, and you can sort of see what it's like. It's in a poor state, and I'm sure Grandad would probably turn in his grave because it was much better than that when he had it. He was one of these sort of people that would look after stuff, and everything would have been meticulously serviced. It would have been dry stored all the time, so it's looking in a very sorry state. And as I said in the previous videos, it was the last thing he did, so it's quite sentimental, even though it's not terribly old and terribly rare. So obviously, as per comments, it's a very deserved restoration project, which we made a start on the last couple of videos. This video is going to be really all about the engine. We're going to, I think, so we don't make it too complicated and I haven't got bits all over the place, we'll do the engine first, and then once the engine's completed, we'll get on and strip the mower. So since the last video, I've been doing a little bit on the engine block. You can see it there. I've paint stripped it and given it a really good clean inside and out. It's still a bit rusty and it needs a bit more cleaning. But what we're going to do today, we're going to just go through the mechanical bits of it and work out which bits, which I think in this case most of it is savable, and what we need to really be looking at. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get you in closer, and then we can have a look at this here engine. So here we go. So there's the rusty Suffolk at the back there. Right, let's get a bit closer on the engine. So there we are. So that's the 75cc Suffolk cast iron engine. It's completely been stripped. So we've got the crankshaft out. We've got the piston conrod out. And we've now got the camshaft with the followers out. So there's not, obviously, the valves themselves, the inlet and exhaust. There's not much of it left. And this is really the way you want to do it, because we want to give it a thorough clean. The essence of a successful rebuild is normally, one of them is cleanliness. We really need to make sure, as we have, and the sump, that we've thoroughly cleaned it and there's no bits of old oil with swarf left in them. Otherwise, you're just going to end up contaminating the new oil and spoiling all your hard work. One thing I would say about, while I've got the sump in my hand, it's worth taking the little plug out, and you tend to find where the drain is, you get a lot of muck in there, so it's worth cleaning that as well. As clean as you possibly can. But we will, the sump itself, the visual wants a bit more cleaning and buffing, so we will do that. But anyway, today we're going to concentrate on the engine block itself, and we're going to see what it needs. So let's sort of get you closer. So as I said, I've given it a really good clean inside, and I've just sort of cleaned the top of the cylinder head as well, or the block, should I say, not the cylinder head. Just get a feel for that. Most of the time with these Suffolks, if you've got a blown head gasket, this didn't have one, but it tends to be, if you have, on the earlier ones, they do suffer, the cylinder heads, they do distort a little bit. and then you can get a little bit of sort of blowing on them. This one's got the sort of later cylinder head, probably see it there, and it's got more fins on it. I'm not sure whether I've got an early one I can show you, but this is the later one. These don't tend to distort too much, but obviously the way you can do it, and with the block as well, is when you've got it apart, probably a nice flat edge across the block, and then we can just sort of see what that's like. We can sort of go both ways if we like, so let's have a look. Just lay that across. I mean, it wasn't blowing, and just sort of visually it looks quite good. I think the thing to remember with the Suffolks in particular, they have got a very thick gasket anyway. So if it was very, very slightly out, it probably wouldn't matter too much. But in this case, I think it's pretty good. And we'll check the cylinder head. It's in there, obviously. Once I've decoked it and removed, you can see the old gasket on there. Once I've removed that, we'll check that as well. But anyway, so we'll concentrate on the block. So what we're looking for, just to see whether this is serviceable, as I say, it's had a good clean, as I said, but we want to look at the cylinder bore. Now, it might be quite difficult to see. There we go. So what we're looking for, really, we're looking for a couple of things. Any nasty gouges, scores down the cylinder, that's what we're looking for. In this case, there's very, very little. You can see it there. And the other thing we'd be looking for is whether it's worn, and you can normally tell by just sort of putting your finger towards the top of the bore, and you can normally feel a lip. If you've got much of a lip, then it would either be have it rebored and an oversized piston, if you can get one these days. I'm not quite sure how easy it would be. Or you'd probably have to find yourself another block. But in the case of this one, it seems to be pretty good. There's very little scoring on it, and I really can't feel any kind of a lip. So I think it's safe to say that the block part of it's okay. The only thing we will do, we will put new piston rings in it, and we will deglaze the bore. So we'll get one of these. I've got one. We'll run it down there just to clean it up and descale it a bit, if you want to call it that. It's something that if you put piston rings in, it is quite important to do it. Either you buy one, you can buy these descaler, you can honing kits, you can buy these, or you could take it to a machine shop. It wouldn't cost you much, and just have the bore deglazed, ready for its new piston rings. So that bit's okay. I think the other bits we're going to be looking at, let's turn it over. So it's quite a sturdy thing. So really the crankshaft is the next thing that I tend to look at. They only hold, these engines, they only hold about half a pint of oil. So keeping the oil clean is imperative on them. And naturally, a lot of people don't change the oil as often as they should. But what we're looking for, obviously, it's a very similar thing. There's the crankshaft. So we've got the big end there. You can see, I think it probably looks worse than what it is. But it feels quite smooth there. You can see there's a few lines in it. But I've seen them really scored up where you've got lots of deep tram lines. And if that's the case, the conrod will be the same. They don't have shells on the conrod. You will end up almost certainly having to replace the crankshaft and the conrod as well. But that one looks quite good, and we can do a little test in a minute as well. We're also looking at the supporting surfaces. They can get very scored up, and again, if we just sort of feel across both sides, they actually feel quite good. Ideally for that test, probably before you strip it down, probably the thing to have done would have been to, it's difficult to sort of get a feel for it because the back plate's not on there, but ideally before you stripped it, you'd have just see if you've got any up and down movement on the crankshaft. The end float, the side to side, that's not nothing really to worry about too much. But obviously, if you've got a lot of up and down movement on there, you've either got worn crankshaft and bushes, or one or the other. They don't often get that bad, but looking at the crankshaft and the bush itself in there, let's take it out. Turn it round, have a look. It's one of these sort of white metal bushes. It's a little bit of marking on it, but it does actually feel quite smooth. So part of the cleaning process and checking process that we want to do, once we've established that's okay, we need to make sure that these oil holes are clean and very free, because obviously we need oil on those parts of the crankshaft. So we've got a couple on there, so we can probably see we've got one there, so that needs to be clean. And then we've got one which is there, and that goes through the other side. We're going to put new oil seals in, which what we'll do, let's just take that seal out, and then we can see that oil hole hopefully a little better. So let's put you down there. We'll get a nice big screwdriver, put that out hopefully. Right, so let's dig that out. I would say that's probably the original seal, because it looks like it's, you've still got the original paint, but that should come out. Making a mess of it. Let's get a better screwdriver. There we go. Right. You can get these very fancy oil seal removal tools, but I haven't got one here to hand. Anyway, so let's concentrate on these oil holes, which are very, very important. You can see it there. So that lower one there, let's just, hopefully we might be able to see some daylight through it. That needs to be nice and clean and clear. There we go. You see that? So these oil holes are very, very important. We've also got on the magneto backplate, we've got very similar. So we've got one there, goes through there, and then we've got, if we look at this one, it's quite interesting. I don't know if you can see, but the bush has either been installed wrong from new or whatever. You can see it's not quite lined up with the notch, or it's possibly slipped round. But the bush itself is quite good. So I think probably what I'm going to do is, rather than bang it out and damage it, I'm going to, before we assemble it, I'm just going to run a drill down and just make sure we've got a proper hole in there. So we will do that before it all goes back together. And obviously we're thoroughly going to clean any swarf that we make. Again, very important. And like the engine block, we've got an oil seal to replace. We will remove that as well. So we've got that to do. So it'll be 2 oil seals. I'm pretty sure they are both the same. So that's the oil seals. Right. So I think what we'll do, we'll go back to the crankshaft and conrod. So let's put you back down there. So let's put some gloves on, and I hopefully won't get too mucky. Right, so here we go. So that's our connecting rod. Again, it probably looks a little worse than what it is. It is actually quite smooth. And then obviously we look at our cap. Quite smooth. So I'm hoping I can reuse that. So I think probably what we're going to do, we're just going to put it on the crankshaft for now. We're going to nip it up and then just see what it all feels like. Good, okay. So ideally we fit this the way that we took it out. I think that is the way. I have marked the big end cap. I think you can probably see there's a little, yeah, it is important that we put this. Let's have a look. So you can see I've marked the big end so I get it right, because it is, I think on these it is possible to get it wrong, but we want to put it back as we found it. So I think we'll just put just a tiny bit of oil on that. Now, somewhere there will be a torque setting for these connecting rod bolts. But we're just going to nip these up. We're not going to go silly. I'll try and get some settings. I've got an idea what they're going to be, but we'll worry about that when we assemble it. So just for now, we're going to nip these up and just see what it feels like. And there's our oil splasher. So let's just rotate it. So it all feels quite nice. So what I'm going to look for is I'm going to look for some sort of up and down movement on it. I can't feel any at all. There's obviously naturally a little bit of end float, which you'd expect near that little bit there, side to side, but up and down it's very tight, so it feels good. So I think we're definitely going to reuse the crankshaft and the conrod. Obviously, in the case of either being worn, sadly these, unlike cars and some of the bigger engines, you have shells, so if it was worn you could just replace the bearings on the conrod, but you can't on this, unfortunately. So it would be a new conrod and probably crankshaft. So while we're here, we're going to have a quick look at the piston. So there's no heavy scoring there. Obviously it's had a clean up. And we did on the last video, just to get a feel, we did have a look and see what the state of the piston rings and the cylinder wear. So this is the old oil ring, and I'm going to put it back in there. We've done this once, but we can have a look again. So what they give you, again, there'll be some measurements somewhere. They'll give you a gap, maximum and a minimum on your ring, all 3 piston rings. This is the oil, and then we've got 2 compression rings. But the wear limits will almost certainly be the same. And just looking at that, there's not much of a gap. So even that old oil ring is I would say there's not a lot of wear on that. And it'll almost certainly be very similar with the compression rings. But nevertheless, it's not good practice not to. So we're going to put a new set of piston rings in it. Obviously, we'll have our new crankshaft oil seals. New head gasket, we'll do that. And obviously our inlet gasket, we'll have one of those. And our valve chest gasket. So we'll have that as well. So far it's looking good. So let's turn the engine back over again. So the beauty with a lot of this old vintage stuff, we don't have any of those silly timing belts to worry about, or chains. It's all gear driven timing, so it's all quite easy. Now I've got the camshaft out of this really to clean it and just have a look at the rest of it, and then we'll get the camshaft so we can have a look at that as well. So that's our camshaft. So there'll be a few things that I suppose you look for. Is it would be obviously wear on the teeth, but looking at the teeth, they're not spiky. At a glance, it looks good. And again, there will be some wear specifications on these lobes here. But just looking at them, this camshaft does actually look very good. There's no tram lines down them, and you'd probably find there'd be a little bit of a lip as well. But looking at it, and again, like the rest of it, we've got some oil holes. We must make sure they're clear. That's how this shaft gets its lubrication. So obviously I've just knocked it out, but the camshaft, there'll be a little burr on there, but obviously the camshaft rotates on this pin. It's quite easy. There's nothing that really holds it apart from a good tight fit. So I'll just drop it in there, the camshaft. So let's just make sure. So I think it's that way it will go in. So yes, the way the camshaft comes out, once we've got our back plate off there, then with a punch, we can just drive the pin out. I normally leave it in there most of the way, just so I can get the camshaft out to check it, and then the camshaft literally just drops out like that. And our timing, which I've said about, which is lovely. So when we don't need to worry about. We can put the camshaft in. We don't need to worry about the timing at that point. But when we refit the crankshaft, that's when we do our timing. But it couldn't be easier. And on the Suffolks and quite a lot of the engines, you'll find there's a little dot like that there. Or there'll be a little scribe mark. So that we'll need to line up with on the Suffolk here. Let's have a look. So I think we can probably see there is a little notch on there. So when we reinstall this and then we put our crankshaft back into the engine, let me see if I can get it to a point where you can possibly see it. It's a little bit more tricky to see it once it's in there, but what we're looking for is, let's go one more maybe. So we should have the little line up with the dot on the camshaft. So no belts, no nothing like that to worry about. Very easy peasy. So yeah, just going back to the camshaft itself, the only other little things that we just have a quick look at is the followers, the tappets. And I've marked them. So that's the exhaust and that's the inlet. I think they are the same. I would need to check the parts list, but I think they're the same. But I always like to just put them and mark them so I know which one came where. We obviously give them a good clean. If you can feel there's scoring or there is wear, then again you'd need to replace those, but they feel quite good. And they just drop in, which is easy. So let's just, but you mustn't forget to put these in before you put the camshaft in. These can only be installed with, you've got to install them first and then the camshaft. So this one is exhaust. So on assembly, we drop the exhaust in like that. We would drop the inlet in like so. We would line our camshaft up in there. Normally there's no shims or anything like that, so I'll try and get my hands out of the way. So there's not normally any shims or washers between there, and then obviously we line it all up. Sometimes I'd probably put a screwdriver or something that side so we can line it, oil it up nicely, and then we just drive the pin back in. And then, as I say, once we assemble it, then we will time it up when we refit the crankshaft. So, right, let's take that back out, the camshaft. We'll take our tappets out again, and we're going to have a look at the valves. So obviously I've got them out. We've got the exhaust on the Suffolk, which is on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the inlet. Normally on most of these, certainly petrol engines, you tend to find the inlet. In fact, if we look at the seat, it looks quite good, doesn't it? The exhaust is the one that really gets very hot and is the one that's probably more likely to be burnt and corroded. But nevertheless, we're going to check them, which we can see they don't look too bad. I think in this case, we're probably just going to need to lap the valves in. In the case of if you had any burnt or very worn seats, you would need to recut the seats and possibly new valves, or if the valves have got a bit of life left in them, you can get these valve grinding machines. Some machine shops might well do it. Quite likely, though, it will be new valves. Anyway, let's have a look at the valves. So we'll take the first one here, because obviously they're out. So we've got this is the exhaust. Now, I think the only thing I would say is, yes, this is exhaust here. The only thing I would say is don't muddle them up. In a lot of cases, the exhaust valve is a different size to the inlet, but don't muddle them up. What is different on the Suffolks, and the same with some, you tend to have a slightly stronger spring on the exhaust. And as I say, this is the exhaust valve. Let's get the inlet valve. And that's the inlet valve. So there's a slightly lighter spring. It's not as heavy. So what we're looking for on the valves, the seating area, which is obviously that part round there, we're looking for any burning marks, any ridges. This is the inlet, and it looks, I've cleaned it up with the wire wool, and it actually looks very good. So I don't think this is going to take a lot of lapping in, but this is the inlet valve. So we've got that. So it does look quite good. The exhaust valve slightly different. It's let's have a look. You can probably see if I sort of turn it. Obviously, we should have a surface where it's making contact, but it's certainly a little bit more burnt, and you can probably see bit of pitting on the seating area, which is sort of somewhere around there. So we're gonna lap these in anyway, make a good seal. So with the new piston rings, hopefully this is going to have some compression. So what I noticed with this, it's a bit of an old trick that I've seen before, and this has been done. We've got a cut in the exhaust. So look at the inlet. Both valves normally look like the inlet one, which is this one. That's been done for a good reason. This engine has had a decoat before at some point, and I've done it myself, putting a screwdriver cut across the head of it so we can lap it in with a screwdriver. I've got some of these valve suckers, but let's put that down. Yeah, what you tend to find, even with the small end, we'll have a go with it. But you've seen these valve tools, lapping in tools, but you tend to find it's very, very difficult to keep it stuck on the valve. In particular, the exhaust seems to, because the surface isn't always very good. So it is particularly difficult, and that slot's been done. So you don't need this. There is another option for doing it, but I think the thing is the only thing I would say is don't go too deep. This is almost, if we have a look at the slot on it, let's try and get it into a position. The hacksaw slot. There we go. You've got to be a bit careful you don't go really any deeper than they've gone, because you'll start cutting into the seating area. But what this is all about, we're going to zoom you in, and we're going to have a go using this slot and making the best of it, because it's definitely going to be much, much easier to lap this valve in doing it with the screwdriver. So what we will do is, let's have a look. So we're going to put a little spring. I found a loose spring under the exhaust, and it's not quite long enough. I've just got an old nut there, you can see. So what we're going to do, the other thing, just before we go any further, let's just take that off. We just want to have a quick look and see what the valve guides are like. And the valve guides are these. They are exactly what it says, these guides. They're driven in, and they do wear. So if we've got a lot of movement in those, you'll probably find some of the oil from the crankcase here will end up getting onto the valve and then eventually into the cylinder. So what we're looking for is a lot of side-to-side movement. In fact, that feels very tight. There's always going to be a little bit, but if it's very worn, you'll get a lot of side-to-side movement. So that sort of tells me a couple of things. The valve stem's probably not worn much, and the valve guide as well is in good shape. If either one is very worn, you've got a lot of movement, you do need to do something about it. It's probably going to be replace the valve, and these guides do actually hammer out. They are hammered in there. You've got one on the inlet, one on the exhaust. But certainly the exhaust side, it feels good. So something we don't need to worry about. So anyway, we're going to go back to this lapping in business. So you can see what I've done there. We'll get a little bit of lapping in paste, and we're going to just put some of, I think we're nearly out of course. But normally these tins, you've got a fine, and then on the other side, you've got a coarse. And certainly with the exhaust, and if it's a bit rough, you start with the coarse. And then when you've got the seat looking quite good and the valve itself, wipe it off, and then you sort of finish off with the fine. So there's not much in this pot, but we're gonna have a go, and we're just putting a bit on the seat. Spread it round nicely. And you've got to be very careful as we don't get any on this valve stem, because we don't want to start grinding away that. So let's just make sure there's no paste on that. We're going to just drop that in. There we go. So you can see it's lifting it slightly. So let's get this screwdriver, and we're just going to see if we can lap this in a little bit. We just want to sort of rotate it and just keep the paste moving. Could do with a slightly stronger spring. Yeah, we could have done with a slightly, well, probably longer spring. So just maybe a wider screwdriver would have been better, but that's all I've got here. So I'm just going to take it out, and we'll just see and get a feel for really how bad this really is. So let's get a rag. Don't want to contaminate that other one. So we'll check the valve first. Let's give it a good clean off. So we can see we're starting to get a sort of quite a nice grey seating area. Not looking bad. So let's just wipe the seat, and then we'll see what sort of a condition that's in. So that's not looking too bad. So I think a little bit more with that, and then we're probably getting fairly close to putting some fine paste on there. I'm just going to add another nut just to hopefully increase the pressure on that a bit. That might be a bit better. So right, let's put a bit more paste on this. Go. There we go. There we go. Right. That's better. Lifting the valve a bit. Just mix it around a bit more. There we are. Let's have another look at that valve. A good wipe. We've just got to remember, when we finish this process, obviously we need to thoroughly clean any of this valve grinding paste. If we leave any of this anywhere, it's going to destroy our engine. So that's looking pretty good there. So I think probably some fine grinding paste. So we've just been using the coarse. Let's just have a look at the seat once more. So that's looking pretty good. So I think probably with that exhaust, I think we can probably do some grinding with the fine paste. But what we'll do, I will do that off camera because it's exactly the same process, but a finer paste just to finish that off. So what we'll do, we'll just have a quick go with the valve grinding tool, because you might be happier doing that, but it is definitely more fiddly, and we'll use the inlet on that one. It's just, so what you would do now, looking how good this is, I don't know whether we really need the coarse paste. We're just going to go straight for a bit of fine paste on that, because I don't think it's going to take much at all on this inlet. So let's just give that a good scoop of paste. It's getting a bit low, and then we're just going to wipe the top of that off. Just make sure there's no paste on that whatsoever on the top of the valve. Let's drop that down. So we're going to have a go with this valve grinding tool. As you can see, this is a new valve grinding tool, so the rubber is actually sticking quite well. Let's just put a little bit more paste on that. Spread it round. There we are. Right. This is actually sticking quite well. Normally, here we go. They don't always stick, and they just keep coming off. I think with bigger valves it's a bit easier, but they're such small valves, it's quite difficult to get it to staying on the valve. Work the paste a bit more. It's squeaky, but I think it's doing the job. Right, so let's have a look at this inlet, see what that looks like. So let's try and get you in a good light. So that actually looks good to me, so I don't know whether we need to do much more on that. Let's just have a look at the seat itself. I'm going to put the spring so I don't lose any of that. And again, when we assemble it, we'll give it another clean, make sure there's no paste anywhere. Let's have a look at the seat. Right. So that inlet looks pretty good. Quite often they are like that. As I say, you tend to find the inlets don't incur the same sort of burning and rusting as the exhaust. So it's really doesn't need much. The exhaust needs a little bit more finishing off. I'll do that probably with some fine paste off camera, I think. Bit of a boring job, but it needs to be done. The only thing we will need to do is, once we've started assembling it, we will need to check the valve gaps. And obviously you've got some gaps between the bottom of the valve stem and the tappets, but we can't do that till the camshaft's in and really it's assembled. But we'll worry about that once the engine's assembled and we're ready to set those gaps. So I think we've sort of more or less checked most of the mechanical side of the engine, and so far it's looking quite good, I think. We've obviously got the magneto, which again we can deal with that once the engine's together. I want to clean up the block a bit more, because before I paint it, obviously I've got quite a lot of the old paint off, but it's still looking quite rusty. So I really want to give that a really good clean, so that the paint on it takes nicely. So I think we're going to wrap that video up. I've got some cleaning to do. I've got a set of piston rings to find for it, some gaskets to find for it, and obviously clean up the block. So there's quite a lot to be done off camera, and hopefully the next video, depending on how we get on, I'm not quite sure whether I'm going to paint it before I assemble it or after, but I don't know whether it really matters one way or the other. But probably the most important thing is get it back together. But there's quite a lot of cleaning up to do, and then get the bits. And then the next video, hopefully, will be assembling it with its new piston rings. So quite exciting. So there you go. That's part 3, the 75cc cast iron engine. And so far it's looking pretty good. I don't think, well, yeah, as I said, my granddad was quite perfectionist, I think is the word. So it would have had oil changes and it would have been looked after. So even though it's got rusty and that's all down to me, it's probably had its servicing and it's been looked after. So I think in this case, I've opened a few of these engines up before, and it all looks quite good actually. I'd say especially the crankshaft and the big end all looks good. So it's all looking quite good. But you know, if you're doing one of these and you find out you've got worn crankshafts, big ends, even though you can't get bits anymore from Suffolk Qualcast, there's good old eBay and there's other places where you can, or if you're lucky you might just pick up a second-hand engine somewhere. They made so many of them that they are still available, even though they're quite old. There's a lot of them around. But they're lovely things to work on, and if you're doing one, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. It's quality through and through, and it's made in England. So anyway, thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Any comments, welcome, and I'll see you on the next video, which might well be next Sunday.